They say life doesn't ask for your permission before throwing you a curveball. But that afternoon, standing with my hands dripping wet in the utility sink of Grayson's bistro, I wasn't ready for one. I was scrubbing rust off a steel bucket when I heard footsteps behind me. Sharp, measured, expensive. I turned, still holding the steel wool, and saw him. Elliot Grayson, my boss, owner of the most prestigious restaurant in New Orleans. Rarely seen, always composed. I'd worked there for over a year, and we'd barely exchanged 12 words. But now he was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed like he had all the time in the world. 3 months' salary, he said casually. Tax-free. I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard. I'm sorry, sir. What exactly are you asking me to do? He smiled, small, deliberate, unreadable. Your name is Caroline, right? Caroline Bennett. I nodded slowly. Well then, Caroline Bennett, I'd like to introduce you as my fiancée, just for one evening. The steel wool dropped from my fingers into the bucket. I'm sorry, what? I'll triple your monthly pay, and you'll be treated like royalty, head to toe. My heart kicked against my ribs. You want me to pretend to be your fiancé? He nodded again, calm as ever. It's for a wedding. A friend's. He's forgotten where he came from. A little reminder might be good for him. I gave a nervous laugh. And you think I'm the woman for the job? Actually, yes. He paused, then added with a wry smile, You're the only one who said yes. I stared at him, stunned. Wait, this isn't a joke. He shook his head. No joke. I need someone who doesn't come from his world. Someone who'll make him stop and think. I clean your floors, Mr. Grayson, I whispered. I don't even own a dress. You'd be surprised, he said softly. There's more to you than you think. I wanted to say no. I should have. But something tugged at me, like a whisper in my bones. Maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe it was the flicker of something familiar buried deep inside me. Something I hadn't touched in years. I had spent 10 years wondering who I really was. A woman with no past, no memories, only a name a kind doctor gave me. Maybe this wedding wasn't a job. Maybe it was a door. There was one more reason too, though I didn't admit it even to myself. I wanted to be seen. Just once. Not as the woman who scrubbed bathrooms at dawn, but as anyone. I'll need help, I said quietly. I don't own a dress, or shoes, or anything really. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a sleek black card. This covers everything, spa, salon wardrobe. My assistant will coordinate it all. I hesitated, then took the card with trembling fingers. So this is a paid vacation? You are. Full benefits. Starting now. He gave me one last nod and turned to leave. When the door clicked shut behind him, I sat down on the supply closet stool, still smelling of bleach and pine oil. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I caught my reflection in the small mirror behind a box of gloves. Under the worn bandana and tired eyes, I saw her, a woman I barely knew. A woman who once wore something other than sadness on her face. I leaned in and whispered to my reflection, Let's find out who you used to be. 10 years ago, I woke up in a hospital bed with no name, no memory, and no one waiting at my bedside. The doctors called me Jane Doe. They said I'd been in a crash. My car had veered off the road, slammed into a tree, and caught fire. They didn't know who I was. There were no documents on me, no phone, no purse. The vehicle was a rental, signed under someone else's name. I was wearing a red dress and a wedding ring, but no one came looking. I should have died. In fact, I did, at least officially. They took me to the morgue, covered my body with a sheet. A paramedic later told me that when he tried to remove the ring from my finger, he felt a pulse. Faint, but there. He said the diamond on that ring was so large, it could have paid off his student loans. But I didn't care about the diamond. I couldn't remember who gave it to me. To this day, it's the only thing I have from that life. I kept it hidden in a small velvet box beneath my mattress. My only clue, my only anchor. They tried everything: news reports, missing persons databases, fingerprint databases. Nothing. Like I'd been plucked from the earth and dropped here without a trace. I didn't even know what I looked like. When they gave me a mirror, I studied my own face like it belonged to a stranger. My features were symmetrical, my hair thick and dark. But nothing sparked. Not a flicker. Then Dr. Samuel Whitaker stepped in. He was the one who fought for my hospital bills, who kept me from being transferred to a state facility. A gentle-eyed man with grief behind his glasses. A widower. A father. A man who saw something in me worth saving. He gave me a name, Caroline Bennett. He said it sounded elegant, rooted, familiar. And when he told me, "You don't belong on the streets," I believed him. It was his daughter, Rachel, who helped bring me back to life. She was barely 20, bright as sunshine and stubborn as hell. She brought me clothes that didn't smell like bleach. She painted my nails while telling me about college crushes. She taught me how to use a fork again when my hands still shook. And slowly, the fog began to lift. Not the memories. Those remained stubbornly locked away. But I stopped feeling like a ghost. Dr. Whitaker found me a job at Grayson's Bistro. Floor mopping, bathroom scrubbing. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. And best of all, it let me disappear. The place was upscale enough that no one paid attention to the cleaning crew. I moved like a shadow between the tables and candlelight. But even in that quiet, strange things began to happen. My fingers would tingle when I walked past the grand piano in the dining hall. One night, I sat down, and my hands moved with a confidence I couldn't explain. Music poured out of me like water. I wrote in perfect cursive without thinking. I spoke French in my sleep. Rachel used to tease me. "You write like a duchess." I would stare at the mirror in my apartment, at the woman with high cheekbones and sad eyes, and whisper, "Who were you?" But no answer came. After a year, I stopped asking. After 5, I convinced myself she never existed. I was just Caroline. Quiet, invisible, unimportant. I called Rachel the moment I stepped out of the staff room. Still holding the black card Elliot had pressed into my hand. I hadn't even changed out of my cleaning uniform. "Hey," I whispered, voice shaking. "I need your help." She didn't ask why, just squealed. "Oh my God, you finally let him ask you out." "What? No, it's not like that." "Wait, what is it then?" I hesitated. "He wants me to pretend to be his fiancée. For a wedding." There was a pause, then a soft, stunned exhale. "That is wildly inappropriate," she said, "and completely glamorous. I'm in. I have 3 days. I'll need 3 hours." And just like that, the transformation began. Rachel took charge like she'd been waiting her whole life to play fairy godmother. She dragged me through a whirlwind of appointments, spas where women in white robes treated me like I was royalty, nail salons that soaked the bleach out of my skin, hair consultations where stylists ran their fingers through my hair and said things like warm gold undertones and soft texture with movement. At first, I couldn't stop flinching. Every time someone touched me gently, I braced for a slap from reality. When the boutique assistants offered champagne, I almost cried. But Rachel kept me grounded. "You're not faking anything," she said firmly. "You're just walking into the version of yourself the world tried to bury." The dress was the last piece. We were in a boutique in the Garden District, surrounded by mannequins draped in silk and satin, when Rachel pulled a gown from a hidden rack. Ruby red, backless, a slit that whispered scandal. I blinked at it like it was a spell. "This one," she said. "I could never, you could, and you will." I tried it on. The fabric slid over me like water. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Rachel's eyes welled up. "You look like the woman you were always meant to be." I turned to the mirror, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't look away. The woman staring back at me had high cheekbones, soft lips, hair like honey in late afternoon sun. She stood tall, elegant, dangerous. She didn't look like someone who scrubbed toilets for a living. She looked like she belonged. That terrified me more than anything, because a part of me believed it. A part of me whispered, maybe this is who you've always been. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my apartment, the ruby gown hanging from the closet door, lit by the flicker of a candle I rarely used. Milo curled beside me, purring like a lullaby. I ran my fingers through his fur, staring at the ceiling. What if this was more than a role? What if this was a chance? A memory waiting in the wings? What if the woman in the mirror wasn't a costume, but a clue? The morning of the wedding, I sat perfectly still on the edge of my bed, hands clenched in my lap. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Even Milo had gone eerily still, watching me from the windowsill like he knew something was coming. When Elliot arrived, he knocked once, then let himself in. I stood in the hallway, already dressed in the red gown, hair pinned, makeup light but deliberate. I could feel the silk against my skin, the slit swaying with every breath. He froze when he saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled, voice low. "You're stunning." I looked down, flushed. "You paid for all of this. Don't sound so surprised." "I paid for the dress," he murmured, stepping closer. "Not the way you wear it." The wedding was held at a lavish estate just outside New Orleans. Pillars wrapped in white roses, champagne towers, string quartets echoing over the garden. It looked like something from a dream or a nightmare. People turned when we entered. I could feel their stares trailing across my skin, curious, envious, confused. But not one of them looked at me like I didn't belong. Then I saw him, Nathan Bellamy, the groom. He was standing near the photographer, one arm around a woman, so pristine she looked carved from porcelain. Savannah, I assumed. His fiancée. He was laughing at something the photographer said, carefree, relaxed, until he turned, until his eyes met mine, and everything stopped. His smile faltered first. Then his whole expression drained, color vanishing, jaw slackening. He stared like he was looking at a ghost, or a sin returned to haunt him. I felt it too, a spark deep in my ribs. Not a memory, not yet, but something older. Recognition. Elliot placed a hand on the small of my back. "Nathan, Savannah, this is my fiancée, Caroline." Savannah tilted her head in polite confusion. Nathan didn't speak. He just stared. I extended a hand, calm on the outside, trembling on the inside. "It's nice to meet you." He took my hand, hesitated first, then brushed his lips against my knuckles like he'd forgotten how to function. His fingers trembled. Elliot raised a brow. "You all right, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." Nathan forced a chuckle. "Yeah, long night, that's all." Savannah narrowed her eyes. "We're in the middle of a photo session," she said flatly and turned on her heel, dragging Nathan by the elbow. But he kept looking back, over his shoulder, at me. The crowd resumed their hum. Music swelled. Glasses clinked. But the air had changed. Like a low-pressure system had settled between the trees. Elliot leaned down and whispered, "Well, that went better than I expected." I forced a smile. "Did it?" He grinned. He looked like he saw his past crawling out of the ground. We moved through the guests. I smiled when needed, sipped champagne, played the role. To everyone else, I was mystery and poise. But inside, my pulse thundered, because Nathan had looked at me like a man who'd buried something he never expected to see again, and now it was staring back at him in heels and red silk. I got home just after midnight. The hallway was dim. My heels echoed against the floorboards as I unlocked the door. Milo usually greeted me, tail curled around my ankles, meowing like I'd been gone for a year. But tonight, nothing. The apartment was too still. The air hung heavy, like it had been holding its breath. "Milo." I called softly, stepping inside. "It's just me." No sound. I set down my clutch, slipping off my shoes. My heart thudded with a strange unease. Something was wrong. Something was off. And then I saw it. In the kitchen. On the table. His body. Curled too tightly. His fur matted. A piece of cord looped cruelly around his neck. Tight, deliberate, unforgiving. His eyes were open. Lifeless. I couldn't breathe. The world blurred. Sound collapsed into silence. I fell to my knees, crawling toward him. My fingers shook as I touched his side, cold. Stiff. Gone. No. No, no, no. I whispered, over and over, voice cracking. Not you. I scooped him into my arms, rocking back and forth on the kitchen floor, as if warmth could undo what had been done. As if love could rewind time. Tears soaked into his fur. My breath came in broken gasps. My chest ached from the pressure of grief slamming into me like a fist. Then I noticed something else. The mattress. Torn. My hand flew beneath it, frantic searching. The velvet box was gone. The ring was gone. My entire past, what little of it I still held, ripped away in the same night. Murder and theft. Cruelty and message. This wasn't random. This was calculated, deliberate. A message left in fur and silence. When the phone rang, I barely had the strength to lift it. My hands were slick with tears and tremors. I pressed it to my ear. Caroline. Elliot's voice cautious. You okay? You left the reception early. I just wanted to check on you. I couldn't form words. Could barely speak. Can you come here? I choked. Please. He didn't ask why. 10 minutes later, he was at my door. And the moment he saw me barefoot in a red dress, makeup smeared, holding a dead cat in my arms, he didn't say a word. He just stepped inside and pulled me into his chest, and I collapsed into him, shattering. We buried Milo in the garden behind Elliot's house. Or rather, he did. I couldn't bring myself to dig the earth. Couldn't touch the cold soil. Couldn't move. Elliot wrapped me in a blanket and held me on the velvet couch as the night curled tight around the windows. He made tea, lit candles, said nothing. I sat there, numb, silent, hollow. And then, the smell hit me. Smoke. Not from the candles. Something older. Burned into memory. I gasped, clutching the sides of the blanket. My breath stuttered. Glass. Shattering. Lace brushing against bare shoulders. Red silk and screaming wind. And a voice, his voice, saying my name. But it wasn't Caroline. It was my name, I whispered, throat dry. It's not Caroline. Elliot looked up from across the room. His eyes narrowed, concerned. What did you say? I turned toward him, fingers trembling against my lap. It's Paulina. My name is Paulina. The memories surged forward like a flood. I saw myself in a wedding dress, not the red one, a different one, ivory lace. I was standing on the steps of my parents' home, laughter ringing through the air, sunlight falling on my father's face. Nathan was there, smiling, charming, lying. We'd been married just hours when it began to unravel. That night, I found him in the den, pacing. His clothes smelled like smoke. Gasoline. When I asked about it, he brushed me off. Just took care of something, he said. But then came the knock at the door. A neighbor yelling. Flames already licking the porch. I ran for my parents' bedroom, screaming their names. Nathan grabbed me, pulled me back, his hand over my mouth. You don't understand, he hissed. They were going to ruin everything. He shoved me to the floor. I hit my head, blood in my mouth. Then, something cold at my neck. A needle. My vision swam. I screamed. He called me hysterical, said I needed to calm down. I kicked him, crawled to the front door, fumbled for keys. He shouted something about control, and you weren't supposed to be awake. I made it to the garage. I took the car, his car, the new one he'd gifted me that morning. My hands were shaking. The brakes didn't work. I flew off the road. Everything went black. When I woke up, I didn't remember the flames. But now I did. Every detail, Every word. Elliot had come closer, kneeling in front of me, his hand on my cheek. "Paulina," he said gently, "I believe you." Tears poured down my face. He killed them. My parents. He tried to kill me too. We're going to make this right. I sound insane. You sound like someone who survived. I broke then, not from grief, but from the weight of being believed. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't crazy. I was seen. Elliot didn't speak again. He just sat there, his hand still on my face, his eyes locked on mine like an anchor holding me steady. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, something in me settled for the first time since the fire. I wasn't Jane Doe. I wasn't Caroline. I was Paulina Caldwell, and I was going to take my life back. The next morning, I woke to the smell of dark roast coffee and the quiet murmur of Elliot's voice in the next room. I followed it like a thread, still barefoot, still wrapped in one of his oversized sweaters. He stood in the kitchen, pacing with a notepad in one hand and a phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, 36 hours of footage. Every angle near her building. No excuses. Yes, I'll cover it. He turned and saw me, offered a short nod, then hung up. "You're awake," he said gently. "Good. I've already got 2 private investigators on it. One's tracking the ownership records of the rental car from your crash. The other's digging into Nathan's financial history." I blinked. "How did you get all that moving so fast?" "I own a restaurant," he said dryly, "but I also invest in people who owe me favors." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "You told me the man tried to kill you. Twice. I'm not wasting time." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small black box. Also, this was delivered anonymously this morning. No return address. I took it slowly, my fingers trembling. Inside, wrapped in a strip of satin, was the ring. The ring. The diamond my mother had given me. The one the paramedic found on my hand the night I should have died. I almost dropped it. Beneath the ribbon was a note. A single strip of paper. Printed in block letters. "You lost." Again. My knees buckled. Elliot caught me before I hit the ground, wrapping his arms around me, lowering me gently to the kitchen floor. "He's taunting me," I whispered. "He knows I remember. He's daring me to come for him." "Good," Elliot said darkly. "Let him. He has no idea who he's messing with now." The next 48 hours were a blur of quiet fury. Rachel brought over a shoebox of old photographs her father had kept. Most were damaged from time, but one of them, a photo of me sitting beneath a tree in a wedding dress, was unmistakable. "I think he always suspected," she said softly, "but he didn't want to overwhelm you. Dr. Whitaker, bless him, wrote a sworn statement that afternoon, outlining my amnesia, my trauma, and the early physical signs of assault he had documented but never fully understood. One investigator traced financial transactions from Nathan's accounts. Hidden beneath layers of shell companies were payouts to a construction firm that had cleared my parents' home after the fire, and a wire transfer large enough to start a franchise business within weeks of the accident. Meanwhile, Elliot's security footage, installed just 2 weeks earlier, revealed a figure in black slipping through the garden gate the night Milo was killed. His face was obscured, but his posture, the width of his shoulders, the faint limp in the left leg, Elliot recognized him instantly. "It's him," he said. "It's Nathan." That moment sealed it. We had memory. We had evidence. We had motive. We just needed a courtroom. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking straight into it, with fire in my blood and witnesses by my side. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Marble floors, high ceilings, polished oak benches. The kind of place built to make people feel small. But I didn't feel small anymore. I walked in wearing a navy suit Rachel helped me pick out, modest, sharp, unshakable. Elliot sat just behind me. Dr. Whitaker on the other side. Rachel, front row. I could feel the heat of their support without turning around. And Nathan? He was already seated at the defense table. Tailored suit, gold cufflinks, his hair slicked back like nothing in his world had ever gone wrong. But when I stepped up to the stand, he blinked. Just once. The prosecution laid it out first. The fire, the unexplained crash, the forged paperwork, the financial transactions, the break-in at my apartment, the veterinarian report on Milo, the velvet box, the ring, the footage. The jury listened, silent and still, as each thread connected to the next, until the entire web pointed in one direction. Then it was my turn. The moment I took the oath and sat behind the microphone, the world narrowed. I looked directly at Nathan. I knew him. I began, voice quiet but clear. Not just as an acquaintance. Not just as the man you see in that suit. He was my husband. Gasps echoed from the gallery. Nathan didn't flinch, but the tips of his ears reddened. I continued. We married 10 years ago. The wedding was beautiful, small, intimate. My parents hosted it in our home. My hands tightened on the wooden edge of the witness stand. That night, he disappeared for an hour. When he returned, he smelled of smoke. I asked. He lied. Moments later, the house caught fire. I paused, swallowed. My parents died in that fire. Nathan told me I was hysterical. He injected me with something, locked me in a room. I escaped, took his car. The brakes had been tampered with. I crashed. I was pronounced dead. I turned my gaze to the jury, but I wasn't. I told them everything about the hospital, the amnesia, the years as Caroline, the job, the ring, the cat, all of it. He found me again, I said. And when he realized I might remember, he sent a message. I lifted the note. You lost. Again. He killed Milo. He broke into my apartment. He took the ring, the last piece of my identity, and used it to mock me. My voice wavered, but I held it steady. I am not a ghost. I am not a shadow. I am Paulina Caldwell, and I am done hiding. The defense barely tried. They had no alibi, no refutation of the evidence, no alternate theory. Nathan didn't testify. He didn't even look at me again. He just sat there, unmoved, unimpressed, like this was a boardroom negotiation, not a reckoning. But when the verdict came, his mask cracked. Guilty, on all counts. Attempted murder, arson, fraud, identity theft, manslaughter. The judge didn't hesitate. 35 years, she said. No possibility of parole. The gavel fell. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I breathed. For the first time in a decade, I exhaled without fear. Elliot stood, slipped his hand into mine. You did it, he whispered. I shook my head slowly. We did. As we walked out into the sun, reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Nathan's name made headlines. But mine? Mine was finally spoken aloud. Paulina Caldwell, survivor, truth teller, and no longer silent. People talk about closure like it's a door you get to shut and lock behind you. But it's not. It's more like a window you finally open, after years of suffocating in stale air. That's how it felt when I walked through the iron gates of St. Augustine Cemetery, clutching a bouquet of white lilacs and wildflowers. I hadn't been here since the funeral. I hadn't really been here at all. Not as Paulina. Not as their daughter. The headstones were simple, elegant, just like they would have wanted. Joseph and Amelia Caldwell, beloved parents, loved deeply, missed endlessly. Someone had been tending to them. The grass was trimmed, the stone clean. A small jar of fresh daisies sat beside mine. I stood there in silence for a long time, letting the wind touch my face, letting the names sink into me, not as tragedy but as truth. I knelt slowly, placing the flowers between the two graves, and I began to speak about everything: the fire, the betrayal, the years I lost, the years I survived, Rachel, Dr. Whitaker, Milo, Elliot. I told them I was safe now, that I remembered, that I finally remembered who I was and who they were. I'm sorry, I whispered, for leaving you behind, for not coming sooner. But I'm here now, and I promise I won't let what happened define me anymore. A gust of wind moved through the trees, soft and steady. And for the first time since I woke up nameless in that hospital room, I felt like I belonged to someone again, to something, to them, to myself. A week after the sentencing, I walked into the clerk's office with a single sheet of paper and a heart steadier than it had been in years. It was official now. Paulina Caldwell, my real name, the name that had been stolen from me, taken apart and buried beneath ash and silence. I signed the document and stepped out into the New Orleans sun, the weight on my shoulders finally beginning to lift. For the first time, I wasn't surviving under someone else's name. I wasn't hiding in plain sight. I wasn't disappearing. I was becoming. Elliot met me outside the building with 2 iced coffees and a crooked smile. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange," I said, "but good." He didn't ask more, just offered me his arm, and I took it. That afternoon, I moved into his home, not as a guest, not as a favor, but as someone who belonged there. The walls no longer echoed. The air didn't feel borrowed. I unpacked slowly, folding old t-shirts beside new clothes Rachel helped me choose. The ruby dress stayed in its garment bag, zipped up and hung in the back of the closet. I wasn't sure when I'd wear it again, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The restaurant staff welcomed me back with wide eyes and cautious smiles. Some of them had never known I was gone. Others whispered, piecing together rumors. I didn't mind. Let them wonder. I had nothing left to hide. On the morning of my birthday, my real birthday, not the one from hospital paperwork, I woke to the sound of a soft meow and a gentle nudge against my cheek. I opened my eyes to find a tiny ginger kitten curled beside me, wide-eyed and purring like he'd always belonged there. I blinked, laughing through the lump in my throat. "What?" Elliot stood at the doorway, holding a small box with a blue ribbon. "He picked you," he said, "but I thought maybe he'd like the name Milo." I scooped the kitten into my arms, pressing my face into his fur. Warm, breathing, new. "Milo II," I whispered. "King of the house." The kitten meowed in approval. Some nights the dreams still came. Flashes of fire, screams in the hallway, smoke in my lungs. But I always woke up with someone beside me, either a man whose hand never wavered, or a kitten guarding my pillow like a sentinel. I used to be afraid of mirrors. Now I look into one, and I see a woman who walked through fire and lived to tell the story. I held the test in my hand, staring at the 2 pink lines like they were a secret written just for me. After 3 long years of trying, of hoping, of crying quietly in the bathroom every month, it had finally happened. I was pregnant. I pressed the little plastic stick to my chest and let out a trembling breath. The baby was so small, still hidden, still quiet, but real. Inside me, growing, ours. In the kitchen, the October sun spilled through the windows, warm and golden, lighting up the table I had spent all morning decorating. My hands moved on instinct now, adjusting silverware, fluffing napkins, checking the roast for the 5th time. Today was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, and every inch of the house was dressed for celebration. But I had my own secret to celebrate, my own joy humming just beneath the surface of it all. I imagined the moment. Ethan would take my hands, eyes wide with wonder, and spin me around the room. He'd laugh, maybe cry, kiss my stomach, say something ridiculous like, "We need to buy a crib today." We'd talk about names, about painting the guest room, about building a world for someone we hadn't even met yet, but already loved. I heard his voice before I saw him. "Babe, you in here." "Kitchen," I called, stuffing the test back into my jeans pocket, my voice too bright, too casual. Ethan stepped into the room with that effortless charm that always made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. His ocean blue shirt made his hazel eyes look almost gold in the sunlight. He kissed my cheek and took in the table with a low whistle. Wow, my mom's gonna love this. She deserves it, I said, smoothing the tablecloth unnecessarily. 60's a big deal. He leaned in and whispered, not as big as the news you've got for me, apparently. I smiled, almost shy. Later, when it's just us. He grinned and kissed my forehead. You're killing me, Anna. The doorbell rang before I could answer, and just like that, the moment was gone. The Mitchells had arrived. Eleanor walked in like royalty, her silver hair pinned up in a perfect chignon, her navy suit sharp enough to make you sit up straighter just looking at her. Anna, sweetheart, she said, kissing my cheek. Everything looks absolutely perfect. Thank you, I said, offering her a glass of wine. I hope it's to your liking. She smiled with rare softness. It's lovely, truly. Frank, my father-in-law, nodded silently and handed over a bouquet of white lilies and a bottle of aged scotch. That was his way of saying well done. The rest of the guests trickled in, Ethan's sister Angela and her husband Mark, their 2 kids already racing through the house, a few of Eleanor's retired teaching colleagues, some neighbors from across the street. The house was full of voices, clinking glasses, the smell of roast pork and garlic potatoes drifting through the air like a memory from childhood. Everyone said the same thing. Anna, how do you do it? This is incredible. You're amazing. I smiled, said thank you, passed plates, refilled drinks, and all the while I kept touching my stomach like I was silently telling the baby, you're already loved. You're already here. Ethan played the perfect host. Charming, attentive, hilarious. He told a story about a work trip gone wrong. Something about a hotel mix-up and a man in boxer shorts screaming at the front desk. The room erupted in laughter, even Eleanor. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, my heart full. He looked so alive, so confident, so mine. For a moment, I believed it. All of it. The clink of glasses, the scent of cake frosting, the hum of chatter in the living room. I wanted to freeze it there, to stop time right in that second. Before I found out, before everything I believed about my life shattered. But that came later. For now, I was just Anna Mitchell, wife, hostess, mother-to-be, and I had no idea that within hours, I'd be someone else entirely. It started with something simple. A question from Eleanor over dessert. Where's Ethan? She asked, glancing around the crowded living room. Haven't seen him in a bit. I looked up from the coffee cups I was arranging. I hadn't noticed he was gone. He was just here. Maybe he stepped out for a call. I offered, though my voice felt strangely distant, like I was already somewhere else. Angela chimed in, probably in his study. He still keeps all his work files in there, right? I nodded and excused myself, wiping my hands on a towel as I walked down the hallway. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. Just a call, just a client. That's what he'd say. That's what he always said. The door to his office was half shut. A sliver of warm lamplight spilled across the hallway floor. I reached out to knock, but then stopped. His voice floated through the gap, low and intimate, and nothing like the voice he used with me. I know, I hate it too, he whispered, and I heard a small chuckle, tender and soft. But what do you want me to do? The house is full of people. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My hand hovered above the doorknob. I can't just walk out. It's her mother's birthday. That would look bad, even for me. A pause, then a laugh. No, of course she doesn't know. Anna believes everything I say. Like clockwork. My stomach turned. He continued. I'll tell her soon. A few more weeks. Let the party dust settle. Then I'll say we're just not working anymore. That it's no one's fault. That we drifted. You know, the usual soft landing garbage. I staggered back half a step, pressing a hand to my chest. I mean, come on. She still thinks we're going to have a baby, he said, followed by a cruel laugh. Poor thing's probably planning names. The queasy warmth in my belly curdled to ice. She's sweet, he added mockingly, but she's not you. She's soft. Predictable. She'll cry, maybe beg, but she'll let go. Eventually. I backed away from the door as if it had burned me. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't want to. The hallway tilted under my feet. My legs turned to liquid. I barely made it to our bedroom before the tears came. Silent, uncontrollable, feral. I clutched the edge of the dresser, gasping like someone drowning above water. Every breath was a betrayal. How long had it been going on? Months? Longer? And Madison, was that her name? The one from the texts? The one in the red dress, the perfume I'd smelled on his coat once and believed when he said it was his co-worker's handshake hug? The dots connected themselves. Too fast, too clear, and suddenly I couldn't unsee them. In the pocket of my jeans, the pregnancy test pressed into my leg. I pulled it out and stared at it. The two pink lines glared back at me like a cruel joke. How was I supposed to tell him now? How could I say, "We're going to be parents," to a man who was already planning to leave? To a man who thought I was weak, predictable, disposable? I heard his laughter from down the hallway. Heard glasses clinking. The sound of a cake being cut. Life moving on. Oblivious. While mine was splitting down the middle. I washed my face. Bit down hard on the scream building in my throat. I looked at myself in the mirror. A woman trying to hold her shape. Then I smiled. Just enough. Just wide enough to pass. By the time I returned to the living room, Ethan had reappeared, charming as ever, holding court like nothing had happened. His arm brushed mine as I passed, and he whispered, "You good?" I nodded. I lied, because the truth was, I had never been less okay in my life. That night, after the last guest had left and the dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen, Ethan kicked off his shoes and dropped onto the couch like a man who had just won something. He loosened his tie and patted the seat next to him. "Come on," he said. "Sit. You've been running around all day." I sat, but only because my legs still hadn't stopped shaking. He smiled at me, the same smile he gave to Eleanor earlier when she complimented the wine. The same smile he used when he was telling his ridiculous hotel story. The smile that used to feel like home. "So," he said, nudging my leg playfully, "what's the big news?" I looked at him, at his familiar face, and felt like I was seeing a stranger wearing a mask I used to love. My hand went instinctively to the pocket where the test had been earlier. I'd taken it out and hidden it under the sink. The proof of my joy, now a secret I didn't know how to share. "I'll tell you tomorrow," I said, managing a soft smile. "I'm exhausted." His brows creased with mild disappointment, but he shrugged. "All right, I'll hold onto the suspense." I watched him walk down the hallway to our bedroom, his shoulders relaxed, humming under his breath like he hadn't spent the evening plotting a quiet exit from our marriage. When the bedroom door clicked shut, I sat there alone, surrounded by half-empty wine glasses and crumpled napkins and leftover cake. The night had been a celebration, but it felt like a wake. I didn't sleep. I lay next to Ethan, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how many nights he'd slept beside me with her name in his mouth, her face in his mind. At some point, I realized the pattern, the unexplained late nights at work, the business trips that got extended, the cologne that wasn't his usual brand, the shirt I found in the laundry with a lipstick stain he claimed came from his sister hugging him too hard at a party. And I had believed it. Every lie. I told myself he was stressed, that the tension in his shoulders was from work, that the way he sometimes pulled away when I touched his arm at dinner was just distraction, that the way his phone never left his side anymore was just modern work life. God, how much had I ignored just to keep the illusion intact? The next morning, I got up early and started cleaning. Not because I had energy, but because I didn't know what else to do. I needed motion. I needed something to keep the panic from taking over. I scrubbed countertops that didn't need scrubbing, rearranged spice jars, wiped the inside of the microwave 3 times. Meanwhile, Ethan went for his usual post-party run, dressed in sweats, earbuds in, acting like the night before had been nothing but a success. The moment the front door closed behind him, I went straight for his phone. I knew the code. Our wedding anniversary. That irony burned. It only took a few seconds to find what I was looking for. The contact didn't have a name, just a number, but the thread of messages was unmistakable. I missed you all night. I hate pretending. When can we be done with this? And then, she won't see it coming. She still thinks we're solid. Attached were photos, one of them together at some overpriced restaurant I didn't recognize. One of her, Madison, in a red dress, the same one Rachel had described. Another photo taken on our back porch. My back porch. The wind chimes I hung last summer were in the background. I barely made it to the bathroom before the nausea overtook me. This wasn't morning sickness. This was betrayal. I sat on the cold tile floor, forehead against my knees, tears mixing with bile in my throat. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the pain visible, but I couldn't, because no one else knew yet. To them, I was still the happy wife, the perfect hostess, the lucky woman who had it all. But I knew the truth now, and I couldn't unknow it. I didn't want to call Rachel. I didn't want to hear the sound of her voice, kind and knowing. I didn't want the sympathy, the outrage, the confirmation that what I'd heard, what I'd seen was real. But I also couldn't carry it alone. Not all of it. So I texted her, "Can we meet? Today. It's important." She replied instantly, "Of course. Same place?" At 11 a.m., I sat in the back corner of a little cafe we used to visit every Saturday morning before life got complicated and busy. I held a mug of tea I hadn't touched and tried to think of the right words. How do you even start a sentence like, "My husband is planning to leave me and doesn't know I'm pregnant"? Rachel arrived 5 minutes later, hair pulled into a low bun, denim jacket already slipping off one shoulder as she spotted me. Her eyes widened as she took in my face. "Anna," she said, sliding into the booth. Are you okay?" I shook my head, just once, and then the words came. I told her everything. About the phone call behind the office door. About the messages on his phone. About the photos. About Madison. About the test. I told her I didn't cry during the party. That I smiled and passed cake like everything was fine. That I lay awake next to him all night and stared at the ceiling, wishing I could be someone else, anywhere else. That I hadn't even told him yet. That I didn't know how. Rachel didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes growing darker with every sentence, her mouth tightening with quiet fury. When I finally stopped, my throat dry and my hand shaking, she leaned forward and whispered, "That son of a bitch!" It was the first time I'd laughed in days. A short, cracked laugh that made my chest ache. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, reaching for my hand. "Or suspect something?" "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I didn't believe someone like him would throw it all away. She hesitated, then said quietly, "I saw him once. A few weeks ago. With her. At the mall." I froze. "I didn't tell you," she continued, "because I thought maybe it was innocent." She was pretty, blonde. He was standing close. They were looking at rings. I didn't breathe. "Jewelry?" I asked. She nodded. She tried one on. He kissed her on the temple. I told myself it was probably work-related, maybe a favor. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. "He was buying her a ring," I said flatly. "He's planning to marry her after he divorces me." Rachel paled. "Anna, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said. "It's mine. For not asking questions. For ignoring the signs. For trusting him when my gut screamed not to." She squeezed my hand. "Don't say that. Trusting your husband isn't a flaw." "No," I said, looking down at my stomach. "But trusting the wrong man might be." We sat in silence for a long time. Around us, the cafe filled and emptied and filled again. Waitresses refilled mugs. The espresso machine hissed. Someone dropped a spoon. I barely noticed any of it. Finally, Rachel asked, What are you going to do?" I looked her in the eye. My voice didn't shake this time. "I'm going to see a lawyer." "Good," she said. "And what about the baby?" I placed a hand over my stomach. "I'm keeping it." "You won't be alone," Rachel said firmly. "Whatever you need, I'm here." I believed her, and for the first time since the world cracked open, I felt something unfamiliar flicker inside me. Not rage, not grief, strength. Maybe I didn't need to survive this alone after all. But even if I had to, I could. I spent the afternoon preparing dinner, not because I wanted to cook for Ethan, but because I needed a setting, a stage, somewhere to place the truth and let it speak for itself. I made his favorite, steak with garlic butter, mashed potatoes with roasted rosemary, Caesar salad with fresh Parmesan. I set the table like it was a date night we hadn't had in years. I lit candles. I opened the wine he liked. I even changed into a dress he once said made me look beautiful, back when I still believed he meant it. At 6:03, the front door opened and his voice called out cheerfully, "Smells amazing in here." I smiled and met him at the door. "I thought we could have a nice dinner." He raised a brow, amused. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. "Just us." He kissed my cheek and wandered into the dining room, humming as he poured himself a glass of wine. "Wow," he said, looking at the table. "This looks incredible, babe." I sat across from him. "You're welcome." We ate mostly in silence. I let him talk about work, some annoying client, a coworker who never replied to emails on time. He asked me once if I was okay. I smiled and said I was tired. That was all he needed to hear. He never asked again. After dessert, he reached for his wine glass, but I stopped him. "Ethan," I said softly, "we need to talk." He froze, just for a second, then placed his glass back down, fingers tightening around the stem. "About what?" "About us." He leaned back, slightly, his expression guarded. "Okay, what's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the other side of the table, and sat next to him on the couch. I wanted him close. I wanted to see his eyes when the mask fell. "I know," I said. His brow furrowed. "Know what?" "I know about Madison." His jaw didn't drop. He didn't gasp. Just blinked. Once. Slowly. "What are you talking about?" "I heard your phone call during the party," I continued. "I read the messages. I saw the pictures. You can stop pretending now." A long pause. Then, quietly, "How long have you known?" "Since your mother's birthday," I said. "Happy anniversary." He rubbed his hands over his face, exhaled, and looked down at the floor. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "But you did want it to happen." He looked up at me, eyes full of something between shame and resignation. "Yes. Do you love her?" Silence, then a nod. I swallowed hard. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Maybe because the hurt had already settled in. Maybe because part of me knew all along. "And me?" I asked. "Did you ever love me?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "I did. I still care about you, Anna. But not enough to stay faithful. Not enough to be honest." "I was going to tell you," he said. I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, bitter and cold. "Too late." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "There's more," I said. "I'm pregnant." That got him. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide. "What?" "I found out the morning of the party," I said. "I was going to tell you, before I found out who you really are." He stood up and began pacing. "You're serious?" I nodded. He ran both hands through his hair. "Oh my God, this changes everything." "No," I said. "It doesn't." He stopped. "Anna, I'm keeping the baby," I said calmly. "And I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." His mouth opened, then closed. "I gave you 5 years of my life, Ethan," I said. "And I would have given you 10 more. But you gave yourself to someone else. You made your choice." He sat down slowly, like the weight of his lies had finally settled on his shoulders. I didn't think it would go this far. It did, I whispered. And now we're done. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And in that silence, I felt something inside me shift. Not break. Not collapse. Strength. Ethan packed a bag that night. Not everything, just the basics. A few shirts, a pair of shoes, his laptop. He said he'd come back for the rest when things were less tense. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his clothes out the window like a woman in a movie might have. I just stood at the door and watched the man I thought I knew walk away without looking back. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed felt louder than any argument could have been. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold before I ever took a sip. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming need to survive. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the law office of Michael Hargrove, a man Rachel had recommended months ago when her cousin went through a divorce. His office smelled like leather and old books and quiet power. "Tell me everything," he said gently, and I did. I told him about the affair, the texts, the photos. I told him I was pregnant, that I wanted to keep the child, that I didn't want a drawn-out courtroom war. But I also wasn't going to be the woman who let her cheating husband walk away clean. He listened, took notes, nodded at the right places. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You're in a strong position, Anna." He stepped out. "You have proof. You're carrying his child. The law is on your side." I felt a strange sensation, then a flicker of control. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stand on. After the meeting, I went to the clinic to confirm the pregnancy. 6 weeks. Everything looked normal. The doctor handed me prenatal vitamins and a pamphlet titled, "Your Body and Your Baby, First Trimester." I held it in my hands like it was a passport to a country I hadn't meant to visit alone. When she asked if the father knew, I said yes. I didn't mention he was now an ex-husband in waiting. Next, I stopped by work. My boss, Linda Carlson, was already at her desk, sipping coffee and going through paperwork. I sat across from her and said the words I hadn't rehearsed, but somehow still came out steady. "I'm going through a divorce, and I'm pregnant." She blinked, then set her coffee down. "Oh, Anna, I'm okay," I said quickly, even though I wasn't. "I just thought you should know. I'll keep working as long as I can. I need the income, and I need the distraction." She nodded slowly. "You've always been one of the most reliable people here. Take whatever time you need, and when you're ready for maternity leave, we'll figure it out." I wanted to cry at her kindness. Instead, I smiled. "Thank you." I came home to a house that felt too quiet. Ethan's shoes were gone from the doorway. His toothbrush no longer sat beside mine. His cologne no longer lingered in the hallway. I walked through each room slowly, like I was meeting them again for the first time. In the guest room, the one we had once said would be the nursery, I ran my fingers along the windowsill and tried to picture a crib, a rocking chair, a new life. Later that night, I FaceTimed my parents. They were shocked. My mother cried. My father's voice shook with restrained anger. But when I told them I was pregnant, something changed. My father sat back, his eyes suddenly soft. My mother wiped her face and whispered, "A baby, you're going to be a mother." "Yes," I said, "on my own." "You won't be alone," she replied. "You have us." And again, like with Rachel, like with Michael, like with Linda, I felt it. Support. Real, steady, grounded support. I didn't know how the next week would look, or the next month, or the next year. But I knew this much. I could breathe. And that was enough for now. 3 weeks after Ethan left, I finally took down the framed photo of us in the hallway. The one where we were standing on a cliff in Big Sur, wind in our hair, sunlight in our eyes, pretending we were invincible. I stared at it for a long time before carefully wrapping it in newspaper and tucking it into a box labeled Old Life. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't there yet, but I didn't need it on the wall anymore. The days became rhythm. I worked. I cooked. I went to appointments. I started a journal, not the kind where you write about your feelings with flowers in the margins, but one where I recorded symptoms, cravings, strange dreams, baby name ideas, and notes to the little life growing inside me. "You're the reason I get up when I don't want to," I wrote one night. "You're the reason I haven't fallen apart." My body began to change, subtle at first. A tighter waistline, a deeper hunger, a fatigue that no coffee could cure. But inside I was rebuilding, not just from Ethan's betrayal, but from years of being small to keep someone else comfortable. Years of folding myself down so his ego could stretch out on the couch. Now I was unfolding. Rachel helped me clear out his things. She didn't ask questions, just brought trash bags and determination. "Do you want to burn this?" she joked, holding up one of his college sweatshirts. I laughed. Tempting. But no. Let's just drop it at Goodwill. Let someone else warm their arms with what I've outgrown. We worked in silence, mostly. Boxed up books. Tossed old razors. Scrubbed the bathroom like we were erasing his presence. When we finished, the house felt lighter. Airier. Like I could finally hear myself think. That night, I lit a single candle and curled up on the couch with a bowl of soup and a baby book Rachel had gifted me. "You're stronger than you think," the first page read. And for once, I believed it. Ethan tried to contact me twice. Once by text, "Can we talk?" "I miss you." I didn't reply. The second time he showed up at the door. It was raining. He looked soaked, disheveled, like a man who'd lost his script. "I just want to talk," he said. "No," I replied, calm and steady. "You don't. You want to feel better." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "Now live with it." He looked over my shoulder toward the hallway, maybe expecting to see some trace of his former life. The shoes, the photos, the woman who used to say yes too easily. But that woman wasn't here anymore. "I hope Madison was worth it," I said gently, then closed the door. I didn't cry afterward. I sat down, folded a load of laundry, and put on soft music while I made a grocery list. Not because I wasn't angry, not because I wasn't still healing, but because I was doing something Ethan never thought I could do. I was moving forward. On Sunday morning, I walked into a local parenting class at the community center. Alone. I introduced myself to the group and took a seat in the back. A woman named April sat beside me and smiled. "First one." I nodded. "Me too," she said. "My ex ran off to Colorado with his yoga instructor." We both laughed. There was something healing about that laugh. Like we weren't victims. We were women in motion. Women becoming. And as I drove home later that afternoon, the fall sun warm on my face, I realized something else. I wasn't just surviving. I was standing. And soon, I'd be ready to run. The first time I heard her cry, everything else disappeared. The white walls of the hospital, the sterile scent, the nurse's gentle rush around me. None of it mattered. All I could hear was her voice, tiny, fierce, undeniably alive. They placed her on my chest, and she was warm and damp and pink and perfect. I stared down at her, this little soul who had grown quietly inside me through months of heartbreak and change, and whispered, "Hi, baby. It's just us now." And it was enough. I named her Clara Grace. Clara because it means bright, clear. And that's what she was to me, the clarity after the storm. Grace because I'd survived only by learning to give myself some. Rachel was the first to visit. She brought flowers and a stuffed fox and a giant thermos of soup. "You did it," she said, eyes wide with pride. "No," I replied, "we did." The nurses said I was one of the calmest first-time mothers they'd ever seen. I didn't tell them it was because I'd already lived through the hardest part. Labor had nothing on betrayal. My parents came 2 days later. My father held Clara like she was made of glass, and my mother wept so gently I almost didn't notice until she kissed my forehead. "I'm sorry for everything we didn't see," she whispered, "but I see you now." I stayed at their house for the first month, not because I couldn't manage on my own, but because it gave them a chance to love me in the way I hadn't let them before. And maybe because I needed to be loved without condition. Ethan sent a letter. No return address. Just his handwriting on cream-colored paper. I don't deserve to be a father, but if you ever want her to know me, I'll wait. I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it and tucked it into the back of Clara's baby book. Not as an invitation, but as a record. A reminder that people make choices, and those choices shape everything. I never replied. We moved back into my house that winter. I painted the nursery yellow. I hung up tiny prints of flowers and clouds and framed a quote above her crib. You are loved. You are safe. You are wanted. And I meant it with every cell in my body. Some nights, when Clara wouldn't sleep, I'd walk the hallway with her cradled against my shoulder, whispering songs I barely remembered learning. I'd press my cheek to hers and tell her stories, not about Ethan, but about strength, about joy, about beginnings that come after endings, about how she saved me without even knowing it. I started writing again. Not just journals this time, but real stories. About women finding their voices. About mothers who rise. I submitted one to a small online magazine. They published it. A month later, another editor reached out. Then another. People wanted to hear what I had to say. I created a small writing nook in the corner of the living room, right beside Clara's play mat. She'd lie on her back and kick her legs while I typed. Every once in a while, I'd read her a line, just to see if she smiled. She always did. And on the rare day I felt the old sadness creep back in, the loneliness, the ache of what was lost, I'd open the front door, step into the sunlight, and whisper, "Look what we built, baby. Just us." Clara would blink up at me, gummy and grinning, and I'd remember that I hadn't just survived. I had started over. And in this quiet, honest life, with its laundry piles and lullabies, its 3 a.m. feedings and 6 p.m. sunsets, I found something Ethan never gave me. Peace. She doesn't know it yet, but Clara is my redemption. And when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her, "Your father left, but I stayed. You were never abandoned. You were chosen every day, every minute by me." Because in the end, she's all I need now.